Before the release of Five Nights at Freddy's 6, we were graced with a book known as the Freddy Files, which was meant to be some weird in-universe investigation conducted by a bunch of different people, and it was a mess. Overall, the book felt more like the fanon guide to Five Nights at Freddy's. That's not really what I'm here to talk about, though, as the Freddy Files did have a few pieces of new information at the time. The most well-known was the introduction of Scrap Baby, which gave us a look into the next game, Pizzeria Simulator. But the other was a withered version of FNAF 1 Chica sitting in a dark room with one light on her, which we hadn't known at the time was the same environment we saw in the salvage sections of FNAF 6. And I think this one piece of evidence could prove a lot of my suspicions about the series right. But we have to question, was this concept art or is it cut content? Why would this matter? Because concept art would simply imply this was Scott just playing around with the idea of scrapped animatronics in general, which doesn't really mean anything. But like many secrets in this series, if this is cut content, could explain an awful lot and disprove some theories in the community that still persist today. As many of you know, Pizzeria Simulator allows the player to play 3 minigames, that being Midnight Motorist, the Security Puppet, and Fruity Maze. The Security Puppet shows us a retelling of the events shown in Give Cake from FNAF 2, clarifying that this was actually HRY's daughter, and not some mysterious boy we've never met. Midnight Motorist is referred to as Later That Night, but the story that it's telling still has yet to be understood, and it's been 5 years since that game came out. Fruity Maze, however, while seemingly straightforward, I would argue doesn't fit with the others. It shows us in detail how Chica was kidnapped, being lured by Afton. If you've watched my videos before, I've stated how I think Susie and the gravestones were actually part of the Save Them Missing Children's incident of 1987. Given William is wearing the Spring Bonnie costume instead of the Fredbear costume, like it's assumed with the 1985 Missing Children's incident, the connections to Shadow Bonnie, the cutscenes from Ultimate Custom Night, and as far back as the date 1987, spawning Golden Freddy during the events of FNAF 1, because even though this is considered an Easter egg, there is an awful lot of Easter eggs inside of this series that still went on to be actual pieces of the lore. We won't get into any of that controversial debate here, but this is important because of the costume used in the image, FNAF 1 Chica. The first theory this would debunk is Follow Me 93, as we now have an endoskeleton wearing the costume, which I've brought up was a weak argument to begin with. This would imply the suits we see destroyed aren't the FNAF 1 models, but confirmed to be repaired versions of the withered animatronics, as suggested in Follow Me 88, which has been presented by both me and ID's Fantasy. This would also debunk a few other theories, such as traditional Molten MCI, that being the missing children were actually put into the fun times after the events of Follow Me. Unless you believe in soul splitting and the belief that one soul can possess 2 objects at once, which still has yet to show up in any way, shape, or form inside of the games. This image would also go on to prove that Happiest Day hasn't happened, as someone has to be possessing this Chica, and again, given the Fruity Maze minigame, it's implied to be Susie still in this body. I think this is also why the gravestones appear when beating the Lorekeeper ending, as this fire was supposed to set them free. And at the end of the day, this game was meant to be the ending of the series, cutting off all loose ends. This would finally allow all of those spirits to finally move on, even though it seems kinda not to have worked. Okay, but why was it cut from the game if it solved so much? The only reason I can think of is Scott decided to switch the characters used to represent them. After all, he kinda already had a cast of over 10 characters, so he kinda had free reign. One of the biggest issues I've had with Ultimate Custom Night is why are the mediocre melodies used to speak for Cassidy, when they have any characters to choose from. This has always led me to think they were connected to one of the missing children's incidents, but at the time, I believed Happiest Day was canon, so I rubbed it off as unsolvable, but I think this sort of allows for the pieces to fit. But I would be lying if there wasn't any issues with this idea. First of all, a lot of my theories of current FNAF rely on the Henry's Fire thing not working, and yet I still have Withered Golden Freddy as the only soul that was actually capable of moving on. This would have either been during the spring locking or during the FNAF 3 fire, and both are somewhat iffy. I think it would work better if Withered Golden Freddy actually held on to William during the spring locking, and together with them and Cassidy, they created the events of Ultimate Custom Night, explaining why Golden Freddy uses the Withered Golden Freddy texture instead of the original, but I still have to play around with this idea. Another issue with this theory is only 3 characters are used to speak, that being Happy Frog, Ned Bear, and Orville. Pig Patch is kinda just there, and Mr. Hippo, he's not helping us in any way. This one I can't come up with an answer for, so I'll go back and look over everything and see if I can make it work. But if it doesn't, I'll end up making a whole nother video about it. Then we have the debate of using cut content. A lot of theorists don't feel comfortable using it, with the assumption that it was cut because the story went in another direction. The only issue with this is Scott usually has a good idea on what that next game was meant to cover, and the pieces of this story were left behind via the Fruity Maze game, which regardless doesn't fit well with the other important lore pieces throughout this game. Overall, I think the addition of this Chica to the lore could lean the story more in the direction I've been sort of exploring with it, but again, we have no way of knowing whether she was actually meant to be a character, so this can only be a theory. A weak one, but a theory nonetheless. Hopefully my next video will be the finale of the William stuff, with explaining why he did save them, and I have a few other videos in the works, in the background. I still have to get out that video about the Silver Eyes potentially being canon. If I tried to paraphrase things enough, I think it's possible, but it still takes a lot of research and an awful lot of work to make that work. I also have a few other ideas that I'm playing around with in the background, as well as a document going over all of what's canon inside of this series. I was originally going to make a video, but from the sounds of it, it sounds like Hyperdroid is making a video on it, so I plan on just creating a document and printing it out, at least for myself, that'll state all of the facts, so that way I can then go cross-reference with every theory against the facts and see if there's any holes that can be found using that list. And I'm considering letting you guys also have access to that list, so that way you guys can actually put together the ideas yourself. But we'll have to wait and see. Until next time, mata ne!